Honestly, if you just take a second to zoom out and look at the whole world, you'll start to see this incredibly bizarre pattern. Pretty much every single nation on this planet is absolutely drowning in debt. We're constantly hearing about the United States of America and that mind-numbing $38 trillion hole they're in, the biggest in human history. But they aren't the only ones. Not even close. You look at the European Union, and they're sitting on about 14 trillion. Japan is even more intense. Their debt is literally several times the size of their entire economy. Even the countries we think of as being loaded with cash, like Saudi Arabia, or the manufacturing giants like Germany and China, are all carrying these massive burdens. It leads to this total paradox. If every single nation owes money to someone else, then who exactly is the creditor? Who is the person waiting at the end of the line to actually get paid? Here's the thing, and it's a bit of a mind bender. If you follow that chain of creditors long enough, you realize something pretty unsettling. The world doesn't really owe money to some mysterious hidden billionaire or a secret shadow government. It basically owes it to itself. But don't let that fool you into thinking it's harmless. Just because we owe it to ourselves doesn't mean everyone is winning. To truly understand how we reached this point, how we reached a point where the planet is buried under $315 trillion in debt, which is literally 3 times the size of the entire global economy. We have to go back to where the seed was planted. And interestingly, this whole national debt idea wasn't born in a fancy Wall Street office. It was born in the middle of a messy, desperate war. Way back in the late 1690s, England was fighting France, and they were flat out running out of gold. The king was stuck in a corner, so he turned to wealthy merchants for help. In exchange for a permanent stream of interest payments, backed by the promise of future taxes, these merchants funded the crown. That was the exact moment the Bank of England was born. It was a total game changer. Suddenly, a state could spend money it didn't even have yet. In return, the lenders got something priceless, a government promise that could be bought, sold, or traded like a real object. That was the birth of the government bond, the actual foundation of our modern financial world. Debt wasn't a sign of failure anymore. It became a measure of credibility and power. The battlefield literally moved from the trenches to the balance sheet. Fast forward 3 centuries, and debt has become the world's most dominant export. Every bank lends, every country owes, and every citizen, through their taxes, their savings, and their pensions, is somehow both the debtor and the creditor at the exact same time. But let's talk about the United States for a second, because that's the one everyone worries about. People love to say, China owns the United States. But honestly, that's mostly a myth. Out of that 38 trillion, only about a third is held by foreign countries, and China's share is actually tiny, only about 2% of the total. The real shocker? Most of that debt is owed back to Americans, to banks, to pension funds, and to the Federal Reserve itself. It's like looking into a circular mirror. The Treasury issues bonds, banks buy them, and then the Federal Reserve often buys them back by basically creating new dollars out of thin air. It's a planetary game of hot potato. Japan lends to the United States lends to Europe through the International Monetary Fund, and Europe lends to developing nations through the World Bank. It's a web of promises secured by other promises. And behind all of this are the markets, the hedge funds and sovereign wealth funds that decide who gets to borrow cheaply and who gets crushed by high interest. In this system, democracy might decide who governs, but the markets decide who actually survives. And here is the big secret of the 21st century. Debt isn't actually designed to be repaid anymore. It's designed to be rolled over. When you or I take a loan, we know we have to pay it back eventually. But governments, they operate on a completely different planet. They treat debt like a rolling subscription service. They issue new bonds just to pay off the interest on the old ones forever. If the United States actually decided to wake up tomorrow and pay down every single cent of its debt, the global economy would probably collapse in 5 minutes. Why? Because those bonds are the world's most trusted, safe asset. Without them, the dollar supply would shrink. Banks would lose their collateral, and the whole engine would just grind to a halt. So, whenever you hear politicians on television talking about balancing the budget or paying off the national debt, you have to realize they're usually just selling a fantasy. The goal isn't to hit zero. It's to keep the debt sustainable and desirable enough so the world never stops believing in it. It all runs on trust. But here's the catch. That trust isn't free. Interest payments flow upward from the average taxpayer and worker to the massive institutions and investors who own that debt. That's why global inequality and global debt are rising at the exact same time. The system is literally built to reward those who own debt and punish those who are stuck paying it. At the end of the day, debt isn't just a number on a screen or a burden to be cleared. It has become the actual glue holding the world's shaky balance together. It's a closed loop of trust, a promise that we all have to keep believing in. But we have to remember what it really is at its core. It's a promise that simply cannot be kept forever. As long as the music keeps playing, the gears keep turning, but the second that confidence breaks, the trillions of dollars won't matter anymore. We're living in a world built on the hope that tomorrow will always be able to pay for today. Subscribe for more.